All right, so let's take a look at the AWS shared responsibility model. And so I've reworked the graphic because it is a bit hard to digest. And so I'm hoping that this way will be a little bit easier for you. I cannot include the in and of here just because we're limited for space, but don't worry, we'll follow that up with the next slide here. So there are two people that are responsible, or two organizations that are responsible, the customer and AWS. And on AWS's side, they're going to be responsible for anything that is physical. So we're talking about hardware, global infrastructure. So the regions, the availability zones, the edge locations, the physical security. So think of all that hardware that's there, those data centers, everything like that. Then there's also software, the services that they're offering. And so, this extends to all their services, but generally it breaks down to the four core. And so we're talking about compute, storage, database, and networking, okay? And when we say networking, we're talking about like physically setting up the wires and also, the software to set up the routing and all that kind of stuff there. Now, looking at the customer side of it, they're responsible for configuration of managed services or third-party software. So the platforms they use, so whether they choose to use a particular type of OS, the applications, so if they want to use like Ruby on Rails, IAM, so identity and access management. So if you create a user and you grant them permissions, if you give them things they're not supposed to have access to, that's on you, right? Then there's configuration of virtual infrastructure and systems. So that would be choosing your OS. That would be the networking. So there could be networking on the virtual machines themselves, or we could be talking about cloud networking in this case. Then there are firewalls. So we're talking about virtual firewalls. Again, they could be on the virtual machine, or it could be configuring like NACLs or security groups on AWS. Then there's security configuration of data. And so there is client-side data encryption. So if you're moving something from S3 from your local machine to S3, you might need to encrypt that first before you send it over. Then there's server-side encryption. So that might be turning on server-side encryption within S3 or turning it encryption on your EBS volume. Then there's networking traffic protection. So, that's turning on VPC flow logs so you can monitor them, turning on AWS guard duty so that it can detect anomalies with your traffic or activities within your AWS account. And then there's customer data. So that's the data that you upload on the behalf of your customers or yourself, and what you decide to, like what levels of sensitivity that you want to lock it down. Do you want to use Amazon Macy to see if there's any public-facing personally identifiable information? That's up to you. So there's a lot here. And honestly, it's a lot easier than you think. Instead of thinking about this big diagram, what I do is I break it down into this. And so we have the in and the of, and that's what I said I could not fit on the previous slide there. But the idea is customers are responsible for the security in the cloud. So that's your data and configuration. So if it's data that's residing on there, or is there something you can configure, you are responsible for it. On the AWS side, they are responsible for the security of the cloud. So if it's anything physical or hardware, the operation of managed services or global infrastructure, that's going to be on them. And this in and of thing is very important for the exam. So you should absolutely know the difference between the two. This is kind of an AWS concept. I don't see any other cloud service provider talking about in and of. So you definitely need to know it, okay?